Hello and welcome to On the Right Track Career Stories with Jane Christophe, a video series and podcast about real people, their real careers, and real lives. Today I'm talking to Graham Abbey. He's a Canadian actor, director, and creative director. He's got some great stuff to share, so join us. Hi Graham, how are you?
I'm very good, Jane. How are you?
Good, nice to see you. Now, why
Likewise.
don't we just get right off the bat and talk about what you do for a living?
I am principally an actor, although like most people in the arts and creative industries, you have to be a bit versatile. So I do a few things, but I have principally acted on the stage at Stratford for 22 seasons now, mostly Shakespeare, because that's my love. I spent a good part of my life, about 10 years, doing film and TV acting. I was the lead on a TV series and a bunch of films. So I dabbled in both sides of that, and I recently have started directing. So I directed a show last year at Stratford. So that's my mainstay, I would say.
Okay, so tell us a little bit how you arrived where you are today.
I mean, it was somewhat a sort of divergent path. I went to school for politics at Queen's, so I didn't study theater. I didn't go to a theater school. I always did it on the side, however. While I was at Queen's doing politics, I did musicals and plays, always on my own free time. And I eventually graduated and was had a room held at a law school. I had done my LSATs and everything, and I just decided I was going to give myself a year to get acting out of my blood, I guess, because I loved it. And I thought, well, I'll give myself a year. So I spent a year in Toronto. I got some great jobs. Those jobs led to other jobs, which eventually led to Stratford, which was a fairly stable acting position. And I deferred my LSATs for a while and then sort of gave up and concluded that I would be an actor. So I really didn't come about it the regular route. I was intending to go into law and do all of that. But I remember at the time I made the decision, I loved theater. I loved the community of theater and the people. So I gave it a go. I guess I was naive enough to jump in, and here I am, 35 years later.
Yeah, no, you were a child actor. I saw on your, I Google searched you.
The Google search, I was a 10-year-old actor at Stratford because I moved here with my mom, and she took a job in Stratford. So my sister and my mom moved here and I was always a singer. I was in boy choirs, and they needed young boys to sing in a production in Stratford, and that's sort of how I got in. But I was very young.
So, okay, so you finish your undergraduate degree, you're planning to go to law school, take a break, and you get some jobs. How do you get jobs in acting?
I worked. There were 6 of us in a 2-bedroom apartment, so it was a bit of a cramped state, but the rent was good. And I worked at a pizza joint, and I applied to a bunch of community theaters in Toronto, one of which I got into. So I did a musical called Hello Dolly with the North York Players. I had agents come out and see that. I signed with a small agency, and they started putting me out. And eventually I got a job doing Shakespeare in the Park in Oakville with a director who was linked to Stratford. So I say that it's, a lot of it in this industry and most is hard work for sure, because hard work puts you in the right place. But if you're in the right place at the right time, there's a lot of that too, and I think for me, I happened to be in the right play. The artistic director of Stratford came down to see it and said, that guy has possibilities. I auditioned for 8 different parts at Stratford that first year, none of which I got, but I got into the company. And I sort of worked my way up from there. But I would certainly say it was a combination of hard work and tenacity and simply being in the right place at the right time, which I think hard work puts you in more of those positions, than normal, I guess.
Yeah, and then being ready when the opportunity comes as well.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's a great deal of, when I look back, I read a lot of stuff saying, most people who were successful were too naive to know the odds. And I think in my business, there's a lot of that rings true. I think if I had thought back then, all those voices that come into your head about saying, oh, you're not going to do this, there's 100 people better than you for this, you can't, then I would have talked myself out of it. But for some reason at that age and at that time, I was naive enough to just throw myself into the fray. And there's something to be said for that, because it allows you to keep swimming, I think. I think as we get older, those thoughts get stronger, probably.
Now, can you tell us, when you were in your acting days, what was your life like? Tell us about your work-life balance and what maybe a week would look like.
It depends. I can talk about both. You know, theater tends to be more regimented and structured than film and TV. The game of somebody in film and TV is a lot of auditioning, and that takes a lot of discipline and time. There were weeks when every night I'd be memorizing between 6 to 10 pages of script, because that next day I had 3 auditions, each of which were 3-4 pages you have to memorize, and you're driving all over town doing that. And the issue with that for actors is that that's a full-time job, but the reality is, of every 30 of those auditions you do, you may get one. Mm-hmm. So the workload when you're trying to find work as an actor is heavy, and it also requires self-discipline, right? Because you have to be willing to do that work on your own. Nobody's standing over top of you telling you, you know, you start work at 9 and you end at 5. It's very, you know, flexible and variable. When you book something, which is the good part, you know, if you're a regular on a series, I would have somebody picking me up, which is the nice part if you're a lead on a series. But you're up at about 4 in the morning. You're on set by 6, and you do a lot of standing around, and then you go home. But that's the good part of being a film TV actor. That's the employed part. On the stage side, typically it's more long-term. So actors will choose the stage. It pays less for sure, but it's more steady and it has longevity. Something like Stratford is an 8-month contract. You'll rehearse from February to May, 6 days a week, Monday through Saturday. You only have Sundays off. Actors only have 1 day off for some weird reason, but and usually rehearsals 10 to 6. So you're solidly in 8 hours. And then once the shows are up, your schedule is a bit better. At Stratford, you're usually doing 3 plays. So most weeks you're doing 8 shows. So on a double show day, you have a 2 o'clock show and an 8 o'clock show. So you have your mornings sort of free, and you have your, you know, mealtime free. But it's you know, when you're doing stage work, you're putting a lot of physical energy out there. So they both have their pros and cons.
Okay, so what happens when that 8-month contract is up?
At Stratford, there's no guarantee. We are contractual workers, and that's the downside of being an actor. You're contractual. So to your question, in a normal environment, when a season ends, your contract ends, and then you wait to be rehired. And that's the case for. I've been at Stratford for 22 years and am considered a leading actor there. I wait to be rehired. Now, usually because of my longevity, they'll approach me and say, "These are the parts we're thinking about." But that's a luxury. There's many actors who have to wait, and they'll wait all winter, and sometimes right into February before the festival calls and says we have a job.
And what do they do to make ends meet?
A lot of actors take on, you know, what we effectively call Joe jobs, and that's from top actors down. So they'll have side jobs. A lot of actors do voice work. That's a great way to supplement. If you're a theater actor, voice work is a way to, and you can sometimes do that from home, and you can do, you know, cartoon character voices, or I've done for years Scotiabank stuff, so sort of the voice of those commercials. So that's a way to round it out. You'd be surprised how many actors make their full living on voice work. Really, it's you know, it pays decently. If it's not something in the business, then it's temp work. A lot of actors work for companies. Companies often hire actors. Medical companies or corporate companies want actors to act parts for them so that their employees can learn situations. So actors will take on jobs at these companies and act the part of a patient so doctors can learn, or they'll work with corporate people so they can learn how to sort of, you know, talk to people, basically. But really, you're scrambling. It's to make ends meet, for sure.
Okay, so talk about today. Like, what are you doing these days? You're not at Stratford. You're more of a director.
Yeah, I have 2 companies. I'm an artistic director as well. I'm a bit mad, but I have a theater company in Toronto called Groundling, which does wintertime Shakespeare. And I have a theater company out in Prince Edward County called Festival Players, which does sort of, it's a tourist region and does theater for them. I also have a company I just started called Ghostlight Creative, which is basically online teaching, connecting actors with students and and doing online classes and digital performance platforms and all of those things. So I don't sit still well, so I'm always creating. But I think anyone who's drawn to this business, I've talked to a lot of artists right now, and you really have to, because of what it demands, you have to know in yourself that you are attracted and almost addicted to creating. And most artists I see, that's a hard thing to turn off. You know, when somebody tells you your job ends, you'll find actors or artists pour it into home rental projects or cooking or something. Your creative energy has to go somewhere, you know, and that same drive will put, you know, anyone who's interested in the arts in good stead, because you know you love to create first and foremost. I say to a lot of young people entering this business, I hear senior actors say, if you can do something else, do it. I don't believe in that, because I think people that are drawn to the arts, that's sort of a rude way of saying, you know, you can't make money. If you're driven and it's the only thing you want to do, you'll be all right, you know, because for most artists, you can't turn that off. In other words, the universe tells you this is where you have to be. And if that means hustling for your meals and pay, you're still getting up in the morning doing something you enjoy. You know, I remember my father, when I was deciding between law and theater, said, you know, he was a judge. And so he said, there's as many broke lawyers as there are actors. So you got to get up in the morning and do something that gets you out of bed, you know, and if that's theater or art for you, then you got to do it.
Okay, so you're married to an actor, is that correct?
Yes.
Does that make life easier?
You know, it's funny. I've been thinking about that a lot lately, because as we are housebound right now, when I'm doing self-tapes, which is a big thing actors will know, I have a built-in amazing actor who can read the scenes with me. So that part of it is amazing. And I think a lot of people would say there's pros and cons, to be honest. I mean, you're both chasing the same stuff. I think if you can find a balance where you appreciate and respect each other's, you know, careers. We're parents as well, so we've got to each find a balance where we take our share of being parents and also pursuing our careers. So I think we've found that balance somehow. It fits and clicks with us, but it's you know, there are certainly some people say it's, if we're both out of work, for instance, which is a time right now, that's hard. You know, it's nice to have maybe a partner who's got a more stable job. So that's the downside of that, is we go through bouts where, you know, we're both looking for work. But we share a passion, I guess, and that's important.
Okay, so what's your favorite thing about your work?
I think my favorite thing, and why I gravitated to theater more than film, is I love connecting with people. I love, you know, there's been some great actors who've said they didn't do film because they can't hear an audience breathe. And there's something to be said on sets. It's a very different atmosphere. I mean, it's a different type of acting, a different style. When you do theater, it's obviously live, and there's a connection to an audience. You know, what a great mentor of mine used to call an ectoplasm that goes between actors and audience. And I am slightly addicted to that connection. I like to hear an audience breathe. I like to hear an audience laugh. I like to hear an audience be moved by something. And I feel like at the end of the day, I feel like I'm affecting something, and that's important to me. So I think that I think a connection to people for me is important in my career.
Mm-hmm. What surprised you the most about your world, your acting world?
I think what surprises me the most is the struggle to maintain confidence in themselves. I think a lot of actors and artists struggle with various things. You know, it comes about at different stages of career. I just taught at University of Toronto, and certainly had young people coming to me about, you know, things they were struggling with, you know, mental illness, mental issues. It's hard because you're constantly in front of people, I think, and that struggle is hard for artists, and it's real. You know, you have to be careful and keep your mental state balanced. I would say the other side, on the business side of it, is how much discipline and work it takes to to forge your own career. As I say, there's nobody standing over you, so you can sleep in till noon. You cannot go to the gym. You can eat, bags of chips, but in the end, it doesn't help you advance. So you got to figure out ways to discipline yourself and stay disciplined, I think, and that's also part of that mental struggle. You need to figure out what that is for you, I think.
So interesting.
And I would say too, Jane, one more thing is simply the insecurity with money. I mean, when I was the lead on a TV show, I made very good money. I mean, it's making no bones that, on TV shows, actors can make upwards of $250,000 or up, and then when that ends, you go to zero. Or when you end a Stratford contract, you go to zero. And for anyone in this wanting to enter this business, you have to be comfortable with the swings. And by that, I mean, you can win the lottery one day, you can get a part and your lifestyle goes way up, but know that in a month you're back down, so finding that middle ground for people who want to enter this profession is important. It's important not to feed into the highs too much, and it's important not to sink into the lows.
What would you say high school students who would be interested in the arts, what skill should they be working on developing?
I mean, it depends what area of the arts. I would say the first thing I'd look at is self-confidence. I mean, understand, I guess, yourself and what you're selling. I talk to young actors about this too, and that means some introspection and some understanding of what you can bring to the business. If you have a gorgeous singing voice and you want to be in musical theater, understand that that's what you're selling, out there, because you have to be your own salesperson, right? I tell a lot of young actors to simply film themselves. And I'm staring at myself on Zoom right now, and you have that eye where sometimes when you watch yourself, you see a different thing than you imagine inside, and that's cool. I know we're all hard on ourselves with physical appearance, but I'm talking more about the personality that comes through, because if you understand what you're packaging, then you can go out and sell it, but that takes some time to begin to understand. I would also say, if it feeds you, if it fuels you, if you wake up in the morning and go to bed at night thinking about doing this, and it's important, I would say, to make the distinction between fame and enjoyment, because fame is fine if that is what you're going after. It's a great lottery ticket, but that's all it is, and it can be fleeting, and it won't sustain you in the tricky times. So I would say work at separating a desire for fame with simply a desire to create and be a part of that community. Fame will come as a byproduct of the latter, but if fame is what's leading you, it's a bit of an elusive chase. There's a lot of getting attention. There's a lot of it. There's Twitter feeds and followers, and you're on commercials, and your friends all write you and say, "Isn't this amazing?" And those moments are great, but paying attention is really what it is to be an artist, and that is focusing on what it is to create, what it is you enjoy about creation, whether someone's paying you or not. Those little moments when you find victories as an artist, those will keep you going in the darkest of days.
That's amazing. I love it. Okay, so what would you tell your younger self, Graham?
That's a good one. That's a very good one. I on one level, I would say you're doing all right. Like I think I didn't have that third eye I have now that judges everything, and I was brave, and I was bold, and I didn't doubt myself. And I think so. I would say good on you, younger self, because my older self looks back and says, "What business did you have doing anything you did?" I was a politics grad, and 4 years later, I was on the Stratford stage. If I thought about that long enough, I talked myself right off that stage. So I applaud the confidence. I think I would have actually encouraged my younger self to be more brave and bold. I mean, I had times when I went out to LA and saw it, and I'm a small town kid, and I just sort of reverted back to Canada. And I would say when you're young, it's a time to be brave as an artist. And those times are fleeting. We convince ourselves when we get older to stay brave, and in any profession, or as we get older, we get more conservative about our parameters. So I would say to anyone who's young out there, I would say be brave, be bold. You're going to fall on your face. You just are. But those are the learning experiences.
Yeah.
As long as you get back up again, those falls teach you so much. So
Yeah.
throw yourself into everything, fail again, as people say, fail better, and get back up and learn as an artist. So
great advice. Okay, 2 more quick questions, and then I'll let you get back to your life. Okay, so what's your most favorite role?
Well, my favorite role in the TV world was my character on The Border, Gray Jackson, who I loved doing for 3 years. I got to play a cop, so I got to run around and chase people with guns. My favorite theater role, is obviously I'm a Shakespeare nut. I loved Henry V. I'm a sucker for Shakespeare's histories. And I must say I have very fond memories of Romeo, which I loved playing at a young age. So I love Shakespeare. I know it's not everybody's bag, but I'm trying to take my niece now through her studying in high school in Shakespeare. And I think I'm getting through to her on how magnificent that language and poetry is. Sometimes in school, it gets distilled down to metaphors and similes and boring things. But that poetry and language and the rhythm of Shakespeare is a fantastic thing. So anything Shakespeare is my bag for sure.
Well, that's very inspiring. Okay, last question, Graham. What would you be doing if you weren't an actor, director, creative director?
I think if I let it all go and put myself in a cave, I would love to write. There goes my creative thing again, because I don't think I could do anything that wasn't creative, but I've always been fascinated by writing. And I think as an actor, you have another, because you're selling people's writing so often, you become a sort of pseudo expert on what works dialogue wise and what doesn't. But I would love to write. I had one time aspirations to be a politician, but I think that's gone. I I worked at the legislature for a year, and that knocked it out of me. I joked that that's where I learned all my acting skills, but it knocked the politics out of me for sure.
Okay, Graham, this has been a great conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and tips.
Good on you.
Really nice catching up with you again.
Likewise.
Yeah. Take care. Thank you.
Okay, you too, Jane.
Thank you for joining us today. If you liked what you saw, give us a like, and even better, subscribe. Hope to see you soon.